Alrighty guys, so now we're going to do the spine for Rudy here. Now I find the spine to be one of the easiest sections of the body based on the method that I'm about to use. It really is quite simple. It's basically just creating a simple joint chain and applying some controllers to it using constraints. And that's pretty much it. There are much more expansive ways to do this, but this is a very simple and quick way. And from what I've heard from various animators, they've kind of said they really do prefer this method, which makes it a lot easier on people who do the rigging. So you'll notice that I'm just using the previous Rudy from the other file. This doesn't have the right foot created or anything. Maybe I'll just pause and do that later, but it's really not necessary. It'll only affect one minor aspect at the very end of this video. So either way, I'm just going to go ahead and start creating the joints, and I'm going to go into my side view for this. And I'm just going to basically be mapping out, the areas where I want his back to be able to be moved. And there's a couple of key points. You need at least 3 for the spine itself. I like to use more because it allows more flexibility on the animator's behalf. But excuse me. We're going to have at least the lower, middle, and upper back. And then we're going to keep going. We're going to define the ones for the neck as well in this, since it is, basically just a continuation of the spine. So first things first, I do need one additional joint here that's going to be called the COG. COG stands for center of gravity. And basically, if you think about the center of gravity of a person, it's pretty much right below your belly button. It also depends on your height, and a couple other factors, the way you're standing, if you're sitting. Your center of gravity does tend to change based on your own proportions, as well as the way you're standing or seated, I guess. Can't think of a better word for that. So either way, I'm just going to create one, and if we think about it, Rudy's belly button's going to be right about here. He doesn't actually have a modeled belly button. Alex did provide me with a file with that, but I didn't use it for this. But either way, we can guess, if that's his lower abdomens, we're going into the middle right here, and then you get up into his chest. It's pretty safe to say that his belly buttons are right around here. So I'm going to create a joint below that to define where his center of gravity is. Now, this one isn't actually going to control too much of the skin later on. It's mostly there to make sure that everything for the it's mostly there to be a root for every other joint, as well as to make sure that everything moves properly in the end. So I'm going to create it right about here. Because I'm going to be placing most of my back joints along this, and I kind of want that to follow with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and create one and hit enter. This one is not going to really be part of the rest of the spine. It's a little separate from that. So I want to have the world space coordinates for its orientation. So I'm just going to go ahead and rename this BNJNT, and you can just call it COG. You can also call it root. It depends on you. I'm just so used to calling it the COG at this point. So, after that, I'm going to go ahead and start creating the spine. And like I said, you need at least 3 for the spine itself, because you want to define the lower, the middle, and the upper back. I like to add more because, again, it just allows your animator to have more flexibility. And if you recall from the previous video, I do like to place them at like a 70-30 split, so like 70% from the front and 30% from the back. And we have a nice edge loop right here that should work pretty well for that. So I'm just going to go ahead and start creating these joints. And again, I've already previously finished that COG joint, so I'm just going to go ahead and start. Looks like we got a nice edge loop right about here that should be able to define where his lower back is. So I'm going to start right here. And again, I'm following this edge loop right up here. And I'll go and create another one. And it's not arbitrary. I'm really looking at his edge loops to define where's his middle back, where's his upper back going to be. Oops. Alright, so it gets a little wonky right here, but I can probably use this right about here. And this will be kind of for his upper back. It really does line up with his chest, so that should be good. And here's the hard part right here, because you've got an arm in the way. A little difficult to tell where you should place it, so I kind of eyeball this as best as possible. Just kind of following this edge loop right here, and I just keep going across. And right about here, this is kind of in the center of his arm. This should be okay up here. This is for, another upper back control. And I could put a lot more joints in this setup right now, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, okay? So from there, I'm not going to add any more. Again, I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to go to his neck. So I'm going to skip right up to here, and this will be kind of the lower portion of his neck for the cervical vertebra. And I'll go up to about here. This should be a good position. I kind of like it a little closer to the back, but I think this will work okay in terms of rotation, because I'm really thinking about the axis at which the joints are being placed. Now, you'll notice this one is perfectly straight up and down because it doesn't have a child joint yet, so it's using the world space axes. So I'm going to create one more joint that's going to be around the forehead. This will not actually affect the skin. This is merely to orient this upper neck joint. So I'm trying to think at the axis at which this should be rotated at. And if you look, you've got this. You got to think about your own anatomy here. It's a little hard to explain. But he's got this natural axis that he's going to be able to rotate on, and I'm kind of defining it with the mouse right here. So I want to try and attain that exact same angle. So what I'm going to do, based on that, kind of mapping it out. I wish I could show you guys with like some lines or something, but I can't think of a way to do that. But basically, I'm trying to find if this is the axis it should have, then I'm trying to think of a line tangential to that, basically 90 degrees from it. So just picturing it in my head, looks like about right there. Close enough. You can see I kind of got the angle. And if I don't like it, I can hit backspace and try again. A little better. That's pretty close. Again, I just hit backspace to remove that child joint. But I'm pretty happy with the angle at which that's placed, so that should work pretty nicely. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. So there is my spine and neck setup, and I'm going to go ahead and name all these real quick. For the spine, I don't really get too technical with them. I'll just be in J and T, and I'm going to copy that so I don't have to keep typing it. This will be, the first one will be spine A01. This will be spine B. Spine, oops, C01. D01. And then we get into the neck. So this one will be neck A01. You could also call it lower neck. And this will be neck B01. And last but not least, this one I just kind of give it a generic name, but this is not a BN joint, it's an end joint. So BEJNT, head 01. You don't need an A, it's the only one. So, alright, so I've got them all named, but I need to take a look at their orientations because I'm pretty sure something went wrong while drawing these. And you can see that some of them are pretty much what I want. And then we get up here and they kind of flip directions. What I'm looking for is like these first three joints right here where X is aiming and Z is pointing out the left side. Well, this doesn't really matter. I tend to use this orientation. There are many options you can choose here, but I always use X as the aim axis. And I just tended to start using Z pointing at the left side. And I just got used to it after a while. So basically, I just need to adjust my upper ones in this case. Yours might not look exactly like this. It's just luck of the draw. I can't really explain why some of them come out right and some of them come out wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust these real quick. I know I'm going to need X-ray because I won't be able to see the orientations without it. And I'm going to go into component mode by hitting F8 and hit the question mark. So now I can grab the orientations, hold down J with the rotate tool on, and holding down J will again reactivate the discrete rotate. So now using discrete rotate, I can snap in 15-degree increments and rotate my orientations. Looks good. Oops, one too many. That looks good. And I'll show you a quick way to do the last one, even though I could do it really easily. There are some times where it just, could be quicker to do it another way. I'll get out of component mode, and I'm just going to select that last joint. And I'll go to skeleton, and I'm going to go to orient joint. And in there, I'm just going to set it to none. It's generally not by default. So I am just going to go ahead and hit orient, And what it normally would do is base it on the parent joint. I do have this issue sometimes with the orient joint, but I'm going to go ahead and do it by hand. It happens every now and then where it just does not orient it, and I can't explain why. But it did do some minor correction to it. One more. But generally it works for me. Just sometimes it decides to do the exact opposite of what I'm asking it to do. So, that one looks good now. And I'll just select this and take a look at them one more time. Yes, 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 all good. Alrighty, so now I can go ahead and parent these in and allow them to join the rest of the group. So I'll take that spine A01 and I'm going to parent it underneath the cog joint. So like I said, the cog is going to be the root joint for absolutely everything on this rig. So all I did was middle click drag it using the outliner and bada bing bada boom. Now you can see that the radii of all the different joint is just completely random here. If you're having an issue with that, like me, because you may be a little OCD like me, you can do a quick little line of mel down here, as long as it says mel, obviously, right here. You just type in select space dash high and hit enter. What that does, first select the root joint and then do that. What it'll do is just select the hierarchy. Basically, it'll select every single joint parented underneath what you have. So then I can go over here and I can mess with the radius for all of them at the same exact time. And you can see they all come out the same. So select dash high, good stuff. Alright, so we've got our root joint, and you see we've got our hip joint down here. That one, the pelvis joint, will also be parented to the cog, creating one seamless hierarchy here. Okay? So, having done that, we're actually pretty much ready to go ahead and do our back controls, and it's quite easy to do. I call this the voodoo pin setup because the control shape kind of looks a little bit like sticking a voodoo pin inside of the back of our rig. So what I do for this is I'll go to my side view and I'll grab my EP curve tool, and I want to set that bad boy to linear because I don't want this to be curvy. I want it to be pretty angular. So it's already set to linear, and I'm going to just snap to the grid here. So holding down X, I'm going to start drawing out the shape of my control. And basically I just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points. So it's a line with a diamond at the end of it. And hit enter. And there it is. This is basically going to be the shape. Obviously it'll be much smaller in the end, but the only other thing I want to do, because I drew the curve, anytime you draw a curve, regardless of where you draw it, the pivot goes directly to the origin. So I'm just going to hold down D and X this time, as opposed to DV. This is D and X, so delta X-ray. And I'm just going to use my middle mouse button and snap the pivot for that controller right at the end of the pin, so you can see that that's where it is. Okay? So now I can scale this thing down, and I'll see what it looks like. I'm probably going to have to shrink down these as well, just from looking at it. And that should be okay. We'll see what happens when I move it in. So I'm just going to take this now, and I'm going to snap it to my first spine joint. Not the cog and not the hip, first spine joint right there. And you may want to go into your perspective view, because as you can see, I messed it up a little bit. Okay? I'll leave X-ray on. So there it is. It's on our first spine joint. The size looks pretty good. I think I'll be okay with that. You can adjust it once you're done placing them all. But I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that and snap it to the next spine joint. And so on. Good. And so forth until I get to the upper neck. And again, I'm just duplicating it. Control D. And there we go. So, now that I've got them all in place, I can take a look at it and see, you know, if you really want, you can go into component mode and just edit the vertices a little bit. It's up to you. It really doesn't matter. But what you do have to do is, once you're happy with where they're placed and they're all snapped to the joints properly, you want to make sure you freeze transformations and delete any history on them, because if you ever want to zero out your rig, you're going to need it so that they're all, you know, 000, 000, 111 when you start. Alright, so now I'm just going to name these, and it's basically going to be named in the same way that we named the spine. So if you want to open that up, you can. It's really not that hard to tell spine A, B, C, D, E, or A, B, C, D, and then neck A and neck B. So we're going to use those same exact names for our controls. So starting with this one, this will be CC underscore spine A01. And again, CC stands for control curve. Second one, CC underscore spine, copy that, spine B01. Third one is spine C01, D01. This one will be neck A01 and neck B01. Copying and pasting does help us too. So, now that I have all those created, I'm pretty much good to go here. I can go ahead and assign these to my spine joints, and it's really easy. It's just a constraint, and we've seen constraints as of the previous video, but in a different sense. We did look at the pole vector constraint, which allows us to go ahead and aim our knee. So this constraint will not work exactly like that. In this case, it's basically going to take the rotations from the controller and apply them to the joint. We're not actually going to parent the joint underneath it, which would also cause that, but because that would ruin our hierarchy. What we're going to do is create a connection between the two of them using a constraint. So it's going to take the rotations from this and apply it to the joint. In order to do that, you use what's called an orient constraint, which can be found under the constraint menu. And I'm just going to go to the option box. I want to make sure that maintain offset is on, just to be on the safe side, because there is some slight differences between the controller and the joint. Let's see what happens if I just leave it off. That's what happens. So we don't want that. So I'm going to keep maintain offset on. Any difference that is between them right now, whether visible or not, it will stay that way, and that'll be kind of like the default position when you start. So in order to do a constraint, you want to select the parent, then also select the child. It's the reverse of doing parenting. When you do just P parenting, by hitting P, you select the child and then the parent. This time you're going to select the parent and then the child. And again, I'm just going to do orient constraint. And you can see that the rotates turn blue on the spine, meaning that there is a connection between them. In this case, that connection is made through, if I can find it, I'll show you real quick. There it is. In our outliner, we have this new node that's called BN blah 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 orient constraint. And that'll basically tell you right here what it's connected to. So don't delete the things with the little exclamation mark. You're going to need them. So basically I've got the first one done. So if I rotate this now, you can see it's rotating the spine. Great. So we go down the line and do it to every other pair. Select the controller, select the joint, orient. And since that's now my last command used, I can just go ahead to the next one and hit G, and it will do the same thing. So I'm going to go up the list, just applying orient constraints between the matching pairs. So now, let's test it. I'll just grab this one. And it looks a little weird, right? It's not bending right. Well, here's where basic parenting comes back into play, regular old P parenting. We want all these to move in sync with each other, just like your spine would. So if I rotate this one, well, everything above it should rotate with it naturally. Now, we couldn't really do something that does it, up and down at the same time. So basically what we want to do is just create a little parenting hierarchy here. So I'm going to start with the top one, which is neck B01, and I'm just going to parent it to the previous one. So now if I rotate neck A, they're both there. And just to reiterate, if you want to do this in your outliner, you can just drag neck B onto neck A onto spine D onto spine C onto B, and B onto A. And that's just using the middle mouse button. If I want to do it the other way, using P, I can just select the child, select the parent, P. Select the child, select the parent, P. Child, parent, P. Child, parent, P. Child, parent, P. Now, if I rotate this one, the entire spine goes with it. And if I select all of them at the same time, we get a very broken spine. But you can see it all rotates somewhat naturally, Granted, you're not going to just grab all of them and rotate, but you can see the flexibility that we have here. Much more than Rudy probably has in real life, but still. It's a very easy setup, and it gives you quite a bit of flexibility. And that's pretty much it for the spine. Now, we have a couple other things that we do need to set up. And that's things for our hip and our cog, as well as just everything. And basically, I'm just going to use some circles in this case. In normal situations, I would use something much fancier than this, but forgive me, I'm making videos for you guys, so I want to make them as quick as possible, as I was asked not to make them 45 minutes long like the previous one. So right now I'm at about just over 20 minutes, so I'm doing good. So I'm going to create plain old boring NURB circle. And I'm going to scale this up just a bit, maybe a little bit bigger, I think. And that should be good right there, okay? This one, I just freeze transformations, delete history. This one is going to be known as the global control. So cc underscore global 01. Alright, and this is basically going to be the topmost curve in all of our control curves. This will basically allow you to position your character in the scene. Alright, so I'll make another circle, and you can just duplicate the previous one if you want. And I'm going to snap this up to the cog joint. Alright, make it a little bit smaller perhaps. And I think I'm going to get picky here and just kind of move the CVs forward. So it kind of looks like it's centered around him, but at the same time, the pivot of this circle, let me get out of component mode, will still be on the cog. Okay, you don't have to do that. Don't worry about my OCD. All I did was move the CVs forward. So I'm going to freeze transformations on that and delete history, and this will be known as our local control. So cc underscore local 01. And last but not least, I'm going to make one more controller that will be slightly different from the local controller. And I'm going to snap that onto the hip. I don't want to just use another circle because it could get very confusing when looking at it like this. So what I'm going to do is just, well, let me turn up. Okay, that's still off. So I can just kind of move these forward a little bit. Again, me getting picky. Don't worry. I'll select every other CV on this. So you can see I'm skipping one on each side. And I'm just going to kind of... okay, I'm really not happy with it. Don't mind me, everybody. I'm going to add some points to this. I'm getting picky. I apologize. Alright. Yeah, that didn't work very well. Whatever, I'll deal with it. For the sake of this video, I will deal with it. And, alright, I'll make one of those little square shape deals. But that'll be a little bit better. Just a little different. Alrighty. So, freeze transformations and delete history. This is going to be the hip controller. So what I'm going to do is just rename it, or pelvis controller. Since we named the joint pelvis, you might want to call this pelvis as well. It's just good to be matching, at least. So cc underscore pelvis 01. Alright. So, we've got them all made, which is great. This is going to be a really simple setup, to be honest. It's just a couple of constraints and just some parenting again. Nothing really difficult, but as long as you do it all right, everything will work perfectly. So, first up, I want to take the local control. Again, just double check and make sure you got the right one selected. And then select the cog. And I don't have the ability to select joints. There we go. So, the local control, then the cog joint. And you want to go to constrain. We want to do a parent constraint. Now this differs slightly from the orient constraint as well as parenting itself. It kind of mimics what parenting does in that it takes rotations and translates and passes them on to the child object. An orient constraint, as you recall from earlier, just takes the rotations. So a parent constraint, while it does mimic the effects of parenting something, it creates no hierarchical connection. You know, when you parent something, it's hierarchically just right underneath it in the outline, or you can see it visibly. It's very easy to tell. In this case, it's just going to do a connection between the translates and rotates that passes it on to the child object. So there is no hierarchical connection, but there is a non-hierarchical connection, if you want to call it that. I'll show you when I'm done with this. You'll see that it's clearly not parented. But I'm going to use a parent constraint, and I'm going to make sure maintain offset is on. Again, this is going to do the translates and the rotates. So I'll go ahead and add it, and you'll see on the cog joint the translates and rotates turn blue. So if I rotate this now, you can see our right leg is freaking out. I'll fix that in a little bit. Don't worry, that's because I don't have the right foot set up at the moment. You'll see that the left one is working, and you can see that when I push this down, the left foot stays. That's because I have everything connected. So, you know what, I'll probably just do it for the next video so that everything's working. It's really not necessary at the moment. So far everything is okay. Again, if you look at the local controller in the outliner, there's nothing parented underneath it. Where's the cog? Right there. So there is no hierarchical connection. There's nothing parented underneath this right now. So that's what I mean by a parent constraint. And if you select the cog, you can see there's just blue, meaning a connection, which is good. Alright, so I got one more constraint to set up here, and that's for the hip controller. So you select the hip controller, and select the hip joint, pelvis in this case, and just do an orient constraint. And this will allow you to just rotate the hips around. This gives you some extra flexibility in terms of the way the hips can move. You can get really nice contrapposto on your character, that natural S-curve of the human body, and that helps out a lot. Alright, but those are the only two constraints. We did a parent constraint to the cog from the local control, and an orient constraint to the pelvis joint from the pelvis controller. Okay? So now we just got to do some parenting. And basically what you want to do, you want to take your spine controllers, all those little voodoo pins, that whole hierarchy, I'm just going to parent that under the local. Again, I'm just middle mouse dragging in my outliner. I really like to do that. It's a lot quicker. So now if I move the local, you can see the whole spine goes with it. That's great. I also want to take the pelvis controller and parent that into the local. So now, wherever the cog goes, the hip follows, and you can get some extra, hip movement out of it. And last but certainly not least, we want to take the local controller and parent that underneath the global controller. So now, wherever I move my global, everything will go. Yes, I see that the foot is not going because I forgot to do that one. But that's also pretty easy, because all you got to do is take both of your feet controllers. As you can see, I only have one. You know what? I'll just do it for the sake of argument. I'm going to pause real quick, and when we come back, we'll have the right foot. Alright, so now I got the right foot controller. Now, I don't have any of the attributes set up, but you can see that it does work now, at least in that sense. So that's good. So what I want to do is take both of these feet controllers and parent them under the global as well. The reason why I want to put the feet controller on the same level as the local is so that when I grab the local controller, the feet stay planted on the ground. Everything above it, and the hip controller as well, which is technically below it, will go with it. So you can see that you can leave the feet on the ground and everything else will move. And that's great. That's pure hierarchical stuff that makes it just work really awesome from the get-go. So, having done that, and again, I can do the opposite as well, the spine is now done. So, we did it in just under 30 minutes, so hopefully you guys are happy with the time on this video. I apologize if I'm a little long-winded. That's just some extra stuff, don't worry about that. But either way, next up we're going to do the arms, and then we'll get to the hands right after that. So, hopefully you enjoy this video.